This happened not too long ago, and honestly, I still can't shake how creepy it was. I take the bus to and from work most days. It's usually the same routine. Put in my earbuds, zone out, and try not to fall asleep. That night started out no different. When I got on the bus, it was nearly empty. Just one other person was there. A woman sitting near the front, minding her business, scrolling through her phone. I did what everyone does, grabbed a seat far away from her. You don't crowd someone when there's a whole bus of empty seats. That's just basic human decency. We rolled along for a couple of stops without picking anyone else up, and I was feeling pretty chill. Then, at the next stop, this guy gets on. He was wearing this oversized hoodie with the hood pulled up, so I couldn't really see his face. He didn't look threatening or anything, just kind of average. But then, instead of sitting anywhere else, he walks right past rows of empty seats and sits down next to the woman. Like, right next to her. I could see her stiffen up immediately, leaning toward the window like she was trying to make herself smaller. I thought it was a little weird, but maybe he just didn't think it through, you know? Some people don't get the whole give people space thing. Still, the vibe was already a bit off. At the next stop, another passenger gets on, this time a younger guy, maybe a college student. Hoodie guy suddenly stands up, leaves his seat and goes to sit right next to the new guy. Same deal, a completely empty bus, and he plops down like they're best buds. The younger guy looks super uncomfortable, shifting in his seat and sneaking glances at the guy like, what is this dude's deal? Now I'm starting to feel uneasy. I mean, there's weird, and then there's whatever this was. It felt deliberate, like hoodie guy was targeting people. I didn't know if he was trying to mess with them or if he had something worse in mind. The bus rolled on, and at the next stop, a woman with grocery bags got on. Guess what? Same thing. Hoodie guy gets up and sits right next to her. She kept clutching her bags like they were a shield, and she wouldn't even look at him. I could see her glancing toward the driver's mirror, like maybe she was hoping for some help. But what was the driver supposed to do? The guy wasn't breaking any rules. He wasn't yelling or touching anyone. He was just sitting there. But it wasn't just sitting. It was how he did it. Like there was this weird tension in the air. Every time someone new got on the bus, it was like watching a predator zero in on its next target. He'd wait, stand up, and move. And every time the person next to him would freeze up, like they could feel how wrong it was. This went on for a few more stops. By now my heart was racing. I didn't want to be his next target, but I could feel it coming. It was like he was working his way through the bus, person by person. I started planning my exit. I decided I'd get off at the next stop, even though it wasn't mine. No way was I sticking around to see what his endgame was. When the bus slowed down, I grabbed my bag, hit the stop button, and stood up. As I walked toward the door, I made the mistake of glancing back. That's when I saw him, standing in the aisle, watching me. He wasn't moving, wasn't talking, just standing there like a statue, his face completely blank. But his eyes, they were locked on me. My stomach dropped. I stepped off the bus and into the cool night air, my heart pounding. The doors hissed shut behind me, and I heard the engine rumble as the bus pulled away. I thought that was the end of it. I mean, I was off the bus. I was safe, right? Wrong. I don't know what made me turn around, maybe instinct, but when I did, there he was. Hoodie guy. He was standing at the end of the street, half in shadow, just watching me. I froze. How had he gotten off the bus so fast? And why was he just standing there? Then he did the creepiest thing. He smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It didn't say, "Hey, no hard feelings." It was like he was telling me he knew something I didn't. Something I wasn't going to like. That was enough for me. I turned and walked as fast as I could without breaking into a full sprint. My apartment building was just a couple of blocks away, but it felt like miles. I kept glancing over my shoulder, and every time I did, I expected to see him right behind me. But he wasn't there. The street was empty. When I finally made it inside, I slammed the door and locked it. Deadbolt, chain, everything. I even checked all the windows, just in case. Then I sat on the couch, shaking, trying to calm myself down. My mind was racing with all the what-ifs. What if he followed me? What if he knew where I lived? What if this wasn't over? It's been a few weeks, and I haven't seen Hoodie Guy again, but I still think about him. I've started taking ride shares more often, even though it's expensive, just because I can't bring myself to get back on that bus. And when I do, I sit near the driver where I can see everything. So yeah, if you're ever on a bus and something feels off, trust your gut. Don't sit there convincing yourself it's nothing. Get off, call someone, do whatever you have to do. Because sometimes it's not just your imagination. Sometimes someone really is watching you. I've always enjoyed long train rides, the rhythmic clatter of the tracks, the hum of the engine. It's like a lullaby, perfect for zoning out, reading, or even catching a nap if you're lucky. That night, I was dead tired, so I figured I'd sleep a bit and wake up closer to my stop. The train wasn't crowded, just a handful of passengers scattered through the car. I found a seat toward the back, tucked my bag under my arm, and leaned against the window. Before I knew it, I was out cold. When I woke up, it took me a moment to realize where I was. The train was still moving, the lights flickering slightly as we passed through a tunnel. I stretched and rubbed my eyes, but something caught my attention. My hands. I glanced down and froze. My hands were covered in black marks, random lines, swirls, and shapes, all drawn in thick black marker. The ink was smudged in some places, like I'd rubbed at it in my sleep, but the designs were still clear enough to see. At first I thought it was some kind of prank. Maybe I'd fallen asleep holding a marker and it had leaked all over me. But I checked my bag, my pockets. Nothing. I didn't have a marker. And the patterns weren't random squiggles. They were too intricate for that. They looked deliberate, like someone had drawn them on me with purpose. I glanced around the train car, trying to piece it together. There were only a couple of people left, a man in a suit staring at his phone, and an older woman knitting quietly near the front. Neither of them seemed to notice me, let alone look like they'd done this. I got up and walked to the small bathroom at the end of the car. The overhead light flickered, casting strange shadows as I leaned closer to the mirror. The marks weren't just on my hands. They went up my wrists and stopped just below my sleeves. Some were smeared, like whoever had drawn them was in a hurry. I scrubbed at them with soap and water, but they wouldn't come off completely. The ink just faded slightly, leaving ghostly outlines on my skin. My heart was pounding now. How had this happened? I didn't remember anyone sitting close to me. I didn't remember anything, really. Just falling asleep and waking up like this. I stumbled back to my seat, my mind racing. I wanted to ask someone if they'd seen anything, but who? The man in the suit hadn't looked up from his phone the entire ride, and the older woman didn't seem like the prankster type. Then it hit me. The cameras. Most trains have security cameras, right? I decided I'd ask the conductor when we stopped. But when I walked to the front of the car, the door to the conductor's booth was locked. I knocked, but no one answered. Feeling helpless, I slumped back into my seat, staring at my hands like they might somehow explain what had happened. That's when I noticed something else. The marks. They weren't entirely random. There was a pattern to them, a repeating set of shapes that almost looked like letters, but not in any language I'd ever seen. I couldn't stop staring. The more I looked, the more the shapes seemed to shift, like they were rearranging themselves in my mind. It was like they were trying to make sense of themselves, but only if I kept looking. When the train finally pulled into my stop, I bolted off, desperate to put it behind me. But even as I walked home, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching me the whole time. Like whoever drew those marks wasn't just playing a prank. It's been a few days now and the marks are mostly faded. I managed to scrub them off after a few more tries, but every now and then I still catch a faint outline, like they're not entirely gone. And the dreams, they've started. In every one, I'm back on that train, alone this time, with the faint sound of someone whispering just behind me. I don't take the train anymore. I don't think I ever will. But I can't help wondering, who did this? And more importantly, why? This is a short story, but I just wanted to make sure to share it. Maybe it'll make someone else a little more careful. I take the bus regularly to get to work and back. It's just part of my daily routine, nothing exciting or out of the ordinary. Most nights I'll just sit there scrolling on my phone or staring out the window, waiting to get home. One night, though, on my way back from work, something caught my eye. I was sitting near the middle of the bus when I looked up and noticed this small black box near the top corner of the window across from me. It was tiny, maybe the size of a deck of cards, but it didn't look like it belonged there. It wasn't like the usual cameras some buses have. This one was just off. At first I thought maybe it was part of the bus, a new piece of equipment or something. But the more I stared at it, the weirder it seemed. It didn't have any visible wires, and it wasn't mounted like the usual security cameras. It was just stuck there, almost hidden, like someone didn't want it to be noticed. Curiosity got the better of me. When the bus stopped, I stood up and walked closer to get a better look. That's when I realized it definitely was a camera. I could see the lens pointing down toward the seats, angled to capture most of the bus. My stomach dropped. I asked the driver about it when I got off. I figured maybe it was new tech the transit company had installed and I was just out of the loop. But when I pointed it out, he frowned and said, "That's not ours. I've never seen it before." I didn't know what to say after that. I just got off the bus and went home. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Who put it there? Why? And more importantly, what was it recording? So, yeah, that's it. I don't have any answers, but it creeped me out enough that I haven't stopped thinking about it since. Maybe it's nothing, but if you take public transit, it's worth keeping an eye out. You never know who's watching. I've been driving for Uber for a few years now. It's not my dream job or anything, but it pays the bills, and honestly, I kind of enjoy it. You meet all kinds of people. The early evening rides are usually folks heading home from work, tired but polite. Later, it's couples on dinner dates, dressed up and excited. And then, the late-night crowd, drunk partiers stumbling out of clubs, sometimes loud, sometimes passed out. It's a mixed bag, but it keeps things interesting. Every passenger's different. Some get in and immediately start talking, telling me their life stories, their secrets, their wildest conspiracies. I've heard it all. Breakups, cheating scandals, even a guy who swore he saw Bigfoot in Central Park. Then there are the quiet ones. They'll barely say a word, maybe a quick hi or thanks, but that's it. I don't mind either type. I just let the ride flow with whatever energy they bring. That night started out like any other. I'd been driving since 5 p.m., and it was your usual mix of commuters and couples. By the time it hit 1 a.m., I was in the late-night drunk crowd zone. My last passenger before it happened was a girl who had clearly had too much to drink. She spent the whole ride alternating between apologizing for the smell of her perfume and laughing at videos on her phone. I dropped her off at her apartment, wished her a good night, and started heading back toward the busier part of town to see if I could squeeze in one more fare before calling it. Not even 2 blocks later, my app pinged with another ride request. Perfect timing, I thought. The pickup location was just around the corner, so I accepted it and pulled up. The passenger was already standing there, waiting. He didn't say a word when he got in. Just opened the door, slid into the back seat, and sat there. No hi, no thanks for picking me up, nothing. But I wasn't surprised. I've had plenty of quiet passengers before. The app already had the destination, an address across town, so there was no need for him to say anything anyway. It was dark and I couldn't get a good look at his face in the rearview mirror. All I could tell was that he was wearing a dark jacket, maybe black or navy, and he sat perfectly still. What struck me as odd was that he didn't do anything. No earbuds, no phone. He just sat there in complete silence, staring straight ahead. Most people, even the quiet ones, at least scroll through their phones or pretend to check their emails. This guy? Nothing. I tried to brush it off. Not everyone needs to be glued to their phone, I told myself. Still, there was something about him that felt heavy, like the air in the car had gotten thicker as soon as he stepped in. We started driving across town. It was late, so the streets were mostly empty, just the occasional car passing by and the soft glow of streetlights flickering through the windows. I kept glancing in the rearview mirror, partly out of habit and partly because I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. He wasn't doing anything weird exactly, just sitting there, but the silence felt louder than it should. About 10 minutes into the ride, I glanced in the mirror again, and my stomach dropped. The back seat was empty. I slammed on the brakes so hard I nearly skidded. My heart was pounding as I whipped around to look. Nobody was there. The door hadn't opened. I would have heard it, I was sure of that. And I couldn't see how he could have gotten out without me noticing. The car was moving the whole time. For a split second, I thought, maybe he's hiding in the floorboard. I leaned over the seat to check, but there was nothing. No sign of him, just an empty back seat. I was shaking at this point, trying to make sense of it. Did he somehow slip out while we were stopped at a light? But no, I hadn't stopped since he got in. Did I imagine him? No, that was impossible. I saw him get in. I remembered the weight of the car shifting when he sat down. I pulled over to the side of the road, put the car in park, and got out to check around. Nothing. No sign of him anywhere. It was like he'd just vanished. Not knowing what else to do, I got back in the car and opened the Uber app to report the situation. I mean, the ride was still active on the app, but there was no passenger anymore. I explained what happened as calmly as I could, but the support rep didn't seem to care. They just canceled the ride and told me I wouldn't be paid for it since the passenger didn't reach the destination. Great. And then, the kicker. As soon as they canceled the ride, the passenger's name and destination disappeared from the app. I couldn't even remember the address to double-check if someone was there waiting for him. It was like the ride never happened. I sat there for a long time, just staring at the empty back seat, trying to wrap my head around it. Eventually, I drove home, locked my car, and went straight to bed, but I barely slept. I kept replaying it in my mind, trying to find some logical explanation. But there wasn't one. Now, whenever I drive at night, I can't help but feel a little paranoid. Every time someone gets in, I find myself checking the rear-view mirror more often than I used to, half expecting them to disappear too. I haven't told many people about this, mostly because it sounds insane. But it happened. I know it did. So, if you're out late at night, whether you're a driver or a passenger, keep an eye out. You never know who or what you might pick up.